The Galactic Council chamber was a marvel of design and scale, a dome so vast it could contain the skies of a dozen worlds. Translucent panels shimmered with the light of nearby stars, casting an ever-shifting glow on the assembly. The floor was a mosaic of swirling patterns, an homage to the union of countless civilizations, while elevated platforms housed delegates from the most advanced species in the galaxy. Their forms were as varied as the stars: plated scales, chitinous shells, radiant energy fields, and towering forms wrapped in flowing silks. The air hummed with tension. Conversations crackled in 100 languages, overlapping in a symphony of diplomacy and dominance. It was clear who held sway here: the elder species, those who had navigated the stars for eons. They exuded an effortless superiority, their every glance and gesture dripping with the assumption of authority. In stark contrast, the humans, seated near the edges of the chamber, were an anomaly. Their delegation was small, almost modest, and their presence here was still a topic of debate. Humans were the youngest species to join the Council, a latecomer to the galactic stage. They had barely begun their interstellar journey, yet their rapid ascent had stirred both curiosity and skepticism. At the center of the chamber, a figure of regal stature stood, a representative of the Malrex Dominion, whose species was famed for their predatory cunning and rigid hierarchy. Their voice was smooth but carried the weight of centuries of conquest. "Esteemed members of the Council," the Malrex representative began, their elongated forms shimmering with a faint bioluminescence. "We are gathered here to evaluate the role of humanity within our Union. It is undeniable that they have shown a peculiar aptitude for survival despite their limited resources and knowledge of the cosmos." The tone sharpened, subtle but unmistakable. "Yet one must ask, what value does a species bring if they shy away from the harsh realities of galactic existence? Humans, as we observe, are curiously hesitant. They avoid war. They tread lightly, seeking diplomacy where force is needed. Admirable, some might say. Others might call it a lack of resolve." A ripple of agreement passed through parts of the chamber, murmurs echoing from alien mouths. Some delegates exchanged knowing glances, their expressions thinly veiled with condescension. The Malrex continued, leaning into the growing momentum. "Their history, though marked by internal conflict, suggests a species that retreats when faced with greater strength. Peaceful, yes, but at what cost? Can we rely on such a species to stand firm in the face of true galactic threats? Or are they merely passengers sheltered by those who have carried the burden of war?" The words hung in the air, heavy and cutting. For a moment, silence reigned. From the human delegation, a figure rose. They moved with deliberate purpose, their every step measured, their presence commanding without arrogance. The human diplomat was not physically imposing. They lacked the towering stature of the Malrex or the shimmering aura of the Zerindai. But there was something in their eyes, a sharpness, a depth that spoke of battles fought and burdens borne. The diplomat's voice, steady and calm, cut through the silence. "I appreciate the Malrex representatives' observations. But before I address them, I'd like to clarify something." Their tone was polite, almost disarmingly so, but beneath it was a restrained power. They paused, letting the weight of their words settle. "The assumption that humanity avoids war because we are timid is a fascinating one. It is, however, incorrect. Completely, profoundly incorrect." The chamber grew still. The alien delegates, who moments ago had been murmuring their approval, now leaned forward, their attention fully captured. The human diplomat stood poised, their expression calm but their voice carrying an unmistakable edge. "For centuries," they continued, "humanity has known war. Not the brief skirmishes or territorial disputes you speak of, but wars that threatened our very existence. Wars that burned continents, consumed nations, and left scars so deep they remain in our collective memory to this day. We do not avoid war because we lack courage. We avoid it because we understand its cost better than most." Their gaze swept the chamber, meeting the eyes, or equivalent sensory organs, of the council members. There was no anger in their tone, only a quiet intensity that demanded attention. "Diplomacy is not weakness," the diplomat said, their voice rising ever so slightly. "It is strength. To sit across the table from those who have wronged you, to seek peace when your instincts scream for vengeance, these are the choices of the strong. Humanity does not seek war because we understand its consequences, not just for ourselves but for others. And we have no desire to repeat the mistakes of our past. The tension in the room was palpable. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably, others listened with newfound respect. But the human diplomat wasn't finished. That being said, they continued, their tone hardening. Do not mistake our restraint for inability. We have fought wars we didn't want to fight, wars we were forced into, and we emerged not unscathed, but unbroken. Humanity is not a species that retreats when threatened. When pushed, we push back. And when cornered, we do not simply survive, we overcome. The chamber was silent. The Marek's representative, who moments ago had spoken with such confidence, now regarded the human diplomat with wary eyes. The diplomat took a breath, their voice softening but losing none of its power. We did not come to this council to be underestimated. We came to contribute, to learn, and to grow alongside the rest of you. But if any among you believes that humanity is here to be dismissed or patronized, let me assure you, you are gravely mistaken. With that, they sat down, their face calm but their eyes alight with an unspoken challenge. The room remained hushed, every delegate processing what had just been said. The balance of power, once so skewed, now felt ever so slightly shifted. The human diplomat rose again, their expression composed but with a fire in their eyes that could not be ignored. The murmurs that had filled the chamber moments ago died away as all attention turned toward them. Let me begin, the diplomat said, their voice measured, by addressing a fundamental misunderstanding. It's been suggested that humanity avoids war out of fear or an inability to confront violence. That assumption could not be further from the truth. Humanity does not avoid war because we are weak. We avoid war because we understand its nature in ways that few species in this room could fathom. Their gaze swept the council, not accusatory but challenging, daring the others to truly listen. Our history is written in the blood of conflict. We have fought wars that spanned entire continents, wars so devastating that they left scars on the land, the sky, and the minds of generations. We've seen the cost of ambition without restraint, the horrors of unchecked aggression. And yet we have also seen how those same fires forge resilience, how even in the darkest hours, humanity has found a way to survive, and eventually, to rise above. Their tone grew sharper, each word a hammer striking the silent tension of the room. There was a time, they continued, when we teetered on the brink of annihilation, when weapons of such destructive power were aimed at one another that a single mistake could have ended our species. We called it the Cold War. For decades we lived under the shadow of total destruction, knowing that at any moment, a spark could ignite a conflict that would burn away everything we had ever known. The chamber was silent, captivated. Even the more dismissive members of the council now leaned forward, their interest piqued. And yet, the diplomat pressed on. We didn't destroy ourselves. We learned. We came to understand that survival wasn't about who could fire the first shot or who could build the bigger weapon. It was about restraint, cooperation, finding ways to coexist even when we didn't trust each other. That lesson, paid for in decades of fear and sacrifice, is why humanity stands here today. Their voice softened, taking on a more reflective tone. But our struggles were not limited to ourselves. When our planet was ravaged by environmental collapse, when rising temperatures and failing ecosystems threatened to destroy us all, we came together, not as tribes or nations, but as a species. We set aside our divisions because we had no other choice. We fought, not against an enemy, but against time, against our own mistakes. And we succeeded. Not perfectly, not without loss, but we endured. Because that is what humanity does. We endure. The diplomat straightened, their voice gaining strength again. You speak of war as if it is the ultimate measure of strength. You misunderstand us if you believe we fear war. No, we fear its cost. We fear what it takes from us, what it leaves behind. We have learned, through centuries of suffering, that war is not something to glorify or rush into. It is something to avoid whenever possible. But when war becomes necessary, when the survival of what we hold dear is at stake, there are few who can match what humanity is capable of. They paused, letting the weight of their words sink in before continuing. Understand this, they said, their voice now a blade, precise and cutting. Humanity's capacity for war is not something we boast about. It is not something we revel in. But it is there, nonetheless. We have faced extinction, not once, but many times. We have stared into the abyss and stepped back from the edge, not because we lacked the strength to fall, but because we had the courage to find another way. And if, one day, we are pushed to the brink again, we will not falter. We will fight. And we will win. The chamber was still. The council members, so accustomed to thinking of humanity as fragile and inexperienced, now looked at the diplomat with a mixture of awe and unease. The diplomat let their gaze settle on the Maurek's representative, their expression unreadable but their voice carrying a final, undeniable weight. War is not avoided because we are afraid. It is avoided because we know, better than most, that once it begins, it is nearly impossible to stop. But do not mistake that understanding for passivity. If the time comes when humanity must act, when peace is no longer an option, we will bring with us everything that we have learned, everything that we have built, and everything that we are. I assure you, that will be more than enough. They stepped back, their words hanging in the air like a charged storm. The silence that followed was deafening, a void filled only by the gravity of what had just been said. Humanity's voice had been heard, and the room could no longer dismiss them. Their latent strength had been laid bare, and the galaxy would never view them the same way again. The human diplomats stood once more, their movements deliberate and controlled, yet carrying the weight of an unspoken challenge. Since it appears there is some doubt regarding humanity's capabilities, allow me to clarify with evidence, not rhetoric. They began, their voice steady. With the Council's permission, I would like to share a brief account of humanity's technological and tactical evolution. A murmur swept through the chamber. Many alien delegates exchanged skeptical glances, while others displayed faint amusement. One member of the HFY syndicate, their translucent forms shimmering with disdain, waved a tendril. Proceed, they said dismissively. Let us see these vaunted achievements. The diplomat nodded, activating a small device on their wrist. A beam of light shot upward, expanding into a towering holographic display that dominated the center of the chamber. The first image was stark, an ancient battlefield, crude spears and shields clashing in the chaos of hand-to-hand combat. This is where we began, the diplomat said. Our earliest wars were fought with little more than sharpened stones and wooden tools. Primitive, yes. Brutal, undoubtedly. But even then, humanity displayed a singular quality, the ability to adapt, to learn, and to improve. The projection shifted, accelerating through centuries of innovation. Bronze gave way to steel, formations of soldiers moving with disciplined precision. Scenes of medieval warfare flickered past, siege engines battering castle walls, fleets of ships engaging in naval combat. War, for us, has always been a crucible of ingenuity, the diplomat continued. When faced with new challenges, we do not retreat. We innovate. The images became more vivid, more modern. Trenches snaked across blasted landscapes, punctuated by the sharp flashes of artillery fire. Aerial dogfights unfolded in the skies, early fighter planes twisting and diving in deadly ballet. The room grew quieter as the scale of destruction increased, mushroom clouds rising into the atmosphere, a stark reminder of humanity's capacity for devastation. World War II, the diplomat said, their voice grave. A conflict so vast it engulfed nearly the entire planet. It was in this war that humanity truly realized the horrifying potential of its ingenuity. And yet, even in this darkness, we found ways to turn the tide, not just with technology, but with strategy. The hologram shifted to a digital recreation of a vast military campaign. Lines and symbols moved across a map, illustrating coordinated strikes, supply routes, and encirclements. Leaders like Napoleon Bonaparte and Sun Tzu revolutionized the way we think about warfare, centuries apart. Strategy, logistics, and adaptability, these are the hallmarks of human conflict. The images transitioned again, this time showing more recent advancements: sleek spacecraft emerging from dry docks, swarms of autonomous drones navigating complex environments, and towering mechs striding across alien landscapes. Our technological growth has not stopped, the Diplomat continued. In our journey to the stars, we have developed weapons and defenses designed for the harshest conditions. Kinetic bombardments, energy shielding, quantum lock targeting systems. And perhaps most importantly, the ability to adapt those technologies to meet unforeseen threats. A faint ripple of unease passed through the council. The holographic display shifted again, this time showcasing smaller, more intimate moments. A group of soldiers helping civilians escape a burning city, a lone medic tending to the wounded under fire, communities rebuilding amidst the rubble of war. But humanity's strength is not only in its weapons or strategies, the Diplomat said, their tones softening. It is in our spirit, in our ability to find hope in the darkest of times. Every war we have fought has produced not just destruction, but also art, literature, and philosophy. From the poetry of Wilfred Owen to the resilience depicted in stories like The Grapes of Wrath, conflict has been a mirror, forcing us to confront our nature and inspiring us to do better. The hologram shifted again, showing moments of unity, soldiers from rival nations laying down their arms for a truce, global summits addressing existential threats, scientists collaborating across borders to prevent catastrophe. When faced with annihilation, whether from war, climate change, or pandemics, we have shown an unparalleled capacity to come together, to unite against overwhelming odds. The room was no longer filled with dismissive glances. Delegates now watched in stunned silence, some with faint expressions of awe, others with visible discomfort. One particularly imposing figure, a representative of the warlike Drascan Empire, leaned forward, their voice a low growl. "Your capacity for war is evident," they said. "But your restraint, that is what surprises me most. How does a species capable of such destruction choose peace?" The Diplomat met their gaze evenly. "Because we've seen what happens when we don't," they replied. "Every weapon we've built, every war we've fought, it has taught us that victory often comes at a price too high to bear. We strive for peace not because it is easy, but because it is necessary. And yet, if that peace is threatened, we will not hesitate to defend it." The chamber fell silent again, the weight of the presentation pressing on everyone. For a moment, the council seemed to collectively process what they had witnessed. It was the Maorek's representative who finally broke the silence, their tone a mix of grudging respect and lingering skepticism. "Your words and your presentation are impressive," they admitted. "But talk is cheap. Can humanity truly stand against the threats that loom in the galaxy?" The Diplomat allowed a faint smile, though their expression remained resolute. "We do not seek conflict, but we are prepared for it. And as for standing against threats? Humanity has done so time and time again. We've faced annihilation before. We're still here." The quiet murmurs of the council had changed in tone. There was no more mockery, no more overt condescension. Instead, there was contemplation, even caution. The Diplomat stepped back, the holographic display fading into nothingness. The room now felt heavier, as if the very fabric of the council had shifted. Humanity had been underestimated for too long. That was no longer the case. The council chamber was abruptly thrown into chaos as an emergency transmission cut through the tense silence. The holographic display reactivated, revealing a barren, desolate planet, its surface cracked and scorched, dotted with the ruins of once thriving cities. The message was grim and to the point: an ancient, hostile force, known only in fragmented records as the Vrexer, was advancing through the galaxy, leaving devastation in its wake. Panicked voices filled the room, delegates from countless species speaking over one another in a cacophony of fear and confusion. The Androlanvu, their serpentine form quivering, hissed, "The Vrexer? That's impossible! They're a myth!" "They're no myth," countered another delegate, their voice trembling. "Their destruction has been recorded on worlds older than most civilizations here." The chaos grew, with accusations flying and old rivalries bubbling to the surface. Some species called for retreat, Others demanded immediate military action. Yet, amid the uproar, the human diplomat remained composed, their face unreadable as they absorbed the news. Finally they stood, their voice cutting through the noise with a force that demanded attention. Enough! The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to the diplomat, their calm in stark contrast to the panic around them. We've faced threats like this before. They began, their tone firm but measured. Not from the stars, perhaps, but from ourselves. Existential threats that could have wiped us out. And do you know what allowed us to survive? They paused, letting the weight of their words settle. Unity. Cooperation. Strength forged from diversity. If we act now together, we stand a chance. If we allow fear to divide us, we're as good as extinct. The room remained tense, but the panic had subsided, replaced by wary attention. Another delegate spoke, their voice doubtful. And what do you suggest, human? That we simply trust you to lead us into battle? The diplomat's gaze was steady. Trust? No. Trust is earned, not demanded. But I offer this: humanity will take the lead in organizing a defense. We will coordinate strategies, share our technologies, and train your forces. But we will not do this as a subordinate species. If you want humanity's help, you must treat us as equals. No more underestimation, no more condescension. We stand together, or we fall apart. The words hung in the air, the chamber collectively holding its breath. Some species were quick to protest, their egos bruised. The Malrex representative leaned forward, their voice cold. And if we refuse? What then? The diplomat's reply was unyielding. Then humanity will defend itself, with or without you. But I warn you, this is not a threat any one species can face alone. If you value survival, you'll put aside your pride and join us. The room lapsed into uneasy silence as the council deliberated. Whispers echoed, deals were brokered, and old alliances were tested. Humanity's demand for equality was bold, and it clearly unsettled some. But the looming specter of the Vrexer forced pragmatism into the equation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the council chair, a member of the ancient and neutral Valtari species, spoke. The council accepts humanity's proposal. You will have the authority to lead this coalition. But know this, human, failure will cost you dearly. The diplomat inclined their head, acknowledging the weight of the responsibility they had taken on. Failure isn't an option, they said simply. The shift was immediate. Humanity's diplomatic envoy became a command hub, issuing directives and coordinating with willing species to prepare a defense. Plans were drawn, technologies shared, and alliances forged with astonishing speed. Some species, hesitant at first, marveled at humanity's efficiency. The Andril delegation, initially dismissive, found themselves impressed by the precision of Earth's tactical simulations. How does a species so young in the galactic timeline possess such refined strategies? One asked aloud. Necessity, the human diplomat replied. When survival is constantly at stake, you learn to adapt quickly. Even as humanity's forces mobilized, the diplomat could not help but reflect on the irony of the situation. All our history, they mused quietly to a close aide. We've tried to leave war behind, to become something better than what we were. And yet, here we are, called to war once again, not for conquest, not for ambition, but to protect everything we've struggled to build. The aide, a seasoned officer, replied with a wry smile. Perhaps that's the difference now. We don't fight because we want to. We fight because we have to. And that makes all the difference. The preparations continued, humanity's ingenuity now a beacon for those species willing to fight. Advanced weapon systems were deployed, incorporating alien technologies into their designs. Entire fleets were retrofitted with innovations that melded human adaptability with galactic advancements. Training camps sprang up, with humans teaching guerrilla tactics, counterintelligence, and the art of asymmetric warfare. But it wasn't just technology or tactics that humanity brought to the table. It was their indomitable spirit. We've faced annihilation before. The diplomat reminded a gathering of uncertain leaders. Time and again, we've looked extinction in the eye and said, not today. And we'll do it again. Not just for humanity, but for all of us. The council members watched in awe as humanity's resolve inspired hope in others. Species that had been paralyzed by fear began to find their footing. Old enemies began to set aside their grudges, spurred by humanity's call to action. Yet, beneath the surface, tensions remained. Not all species were willing to trust humanity completely. Whispers of doubt and schemes of self-preservation lingered at the edges of the alliance. The Diplomat knew that even as the coalition prepared for war, the battle for unity was far from over. Still, as the final preparations were made, the human Diplomat stood firm. They had come to the council as an underestimated newcomer, dismissed and ignored. Now, they stood as a leader, humanity poised to stand against a threat unlike any it had ever faced. The Rexer were coming, and the galaxy would soon learn whether humanity's promise to endure was more than just words. The battle began with the galaxy holding its collective breath. The Rexer forces, an overwhelming swarm of biomechanical ships, surged into the contested system like an unstoppable tide. Their presence was a manifestation of annihilation itself, dark, relentless, and vast. Against them stood the newly forged alliance, its fleet a patchwork of species, technologies, and strategies. At the center of this alliance was humanity, their unyielding resolve driving every coordinated maneuver. Humanity's influence was evident from the start. Their battle formations were unconventional, leveraging speed and adaptability rather than brute strength. Fleets darted in and out of the Rexer ranks, exploiting gaps with precision strikes. Human-piloted ships led the charge, their audacity inspiring even the most reluctant allies. "Stick to the plan!" The human Diplomat's voice, transmitted across allied channels, carried the weight of authority. "Disrupt their cohesion. Force them to respond on our terms, not theirs." The Rexer counterattacked with devastating force. Entire sections of the Allied fleet were engulfed in their relentless advance. Yet, where other species might have broken, humanity's influence held the coalition together. The Diplomat's strategy relied not just on strength but on trust and unity. Squadrons from disparate species covered one another, their combined efforts a testament to humanity's ability to inspire cooperation. The turning point came during the battle's darkest hour. The Rexer's central command ship, a massive construct bristling with weapons, began to unleash its full destructive power. Allied forces faltered, their lines wavering. The coalition was on the brink of collapse. But humanity's response was swift and decisive. Drawing on centuries of asymmetric warfare tactics, human leaders proposed a bold plan, a simultaneous strike on the Rexer command ship, coordinated across all species. "If we cut off the head, the body will fall," the human Diplomat declared, their tone unwavering. It was a gamble, but one the Alliance could not afford to ignore. Human pilots led the assault, their ships dodging through enemy fire with daring precision. At the same time, ground forces, comprised of species that had never fought side by side, launched coordinated sabotage missions on the Rexer's planetary strongholds. Humanity's tactical compassion proved critical. In the chaos of battle, they prioritized not just victory but survival, rescuing Allied crews stranded in space and shielding vulnerable ships. The sight of human vessels placing themselves in harm's way to protect others sparked a surge of determination across the fleet. The final moments of the battle were explosive and chaotic. The Allied strike team, led by humanity's flagship, managed to breach the Rexer command ship's defenses. A detonation rippled through the massive structure, and the once imposing enemy fleet began to collapse in disarray. The Rexer, so relentless and overwhelming, faltered for the first time in millennia. As the remnants of the enemy forces scattered, a stunned silence settled over the battlefield. Against all odds, the Alliance had prevailed. And at its heart stood humanity, their ingenuity and resilience having turned the tide of annihilation. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, the atmosphere was utterly transformed. The representatives, many still reeling from the victory, regarded humanity with a mix of respect and cautious admiration. Gone were the dismissive sneers and condescending remarks. The chair of the council rose, their voice carrying the weight of the moment. "Humanity," they began. You have not only proven your worth but have shown us a path forward in the face of destruction. Today, we recognize you as equals, not just in this council, but in the annals of galactic history." The chamber erupted in applause, though not all voices joined in. Some species, still wary of humanity's power, held their silence. Others, humbled by humanity's actions, approached with offers of friendship and cooperation. The human diplomat accepted the accolades with quiet dignity. But their mind was elsewhere, reflecting on the cost of victory. The battlefield might have been cleared, but the scars of the conflict would linger, not just for humanity but for the entire galaxy. As the session concluded, the diplomat lingered in the now empty chamber, gazing out at the vast starscape visible through the council's grand windows. Their thoughts were heavy with the duality of their species, a species capable of unparalleled destruction, yet driven by an unyielding desire for hope, for unity, for peace. When a junior aide approached and asked what came next, the diplomat's response was resolute yet tinged with melancholy. "We rebuild. We learn. And we remind the galaxy why we avoid war, not because we fear it, but because we know it is the last thing worth fighting for." The aide nodded, their expression reflecting a newfound respect for their leader. Humanity had emerged from the conflict not just as warriors but as stewards of a fragile peace, their influence reshaping the galaxy's future. The stars outside gleamed brighter, their light a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the challenges yet to come. But for the first time, the galaxy stood united, bound by the lessons learned from humanity's trials. As the diplomat turned away from the stars, they carried a quiet determination. The battle had been won, but the true test, the pursuit of lasting peace, was only just beginning.